Today we're looking at the autumn forest again. This is a scene shot in Concord, Mass, out near Codman Estate. And you can see that we enjoy vibrant colors here in New England in the months of October and November. These are sugar maples, and there's a stone fence moving along the side, and they're strongly lit from the right-hand side. It's a complex scene for a number of reasons. One is all that foliage. So we're going to employ the idea of using a large mid-value to help us to give some order and some readability to our image. I start off with a pale wash identifying some of my lighter tones. This will be the big maple in the left center, some accompanying trees on the left and right-hand side, the tops of the stone fence, and then some of the sky that we see through all these trees. Once I have that in place, or once I've identified some of the lighter tones, I work around it. I can use this really rich cadmium yellow and occasionally mixing in some other warm hues such as cadmium orange or a little bit of cadmium red light, some alizarin crimson, anything that suits me. This forest in particular was very yellow. The light was yellow and the surrounding leaves were yellow. It just kind of glowed. If you're standing in the middle of it, you feel like you're in this sea of yellow. So that's sort of what I'm creating with this light wet onto wet wash, is this underpainting of yellow. Some of it's underpainting, some of it will become leaves in the foreground, but basically saturating the paper with yellows, warm colors, some burnt sienna now, and building up an underpainting, also building up a feeling of the canopy and forest. I'm counting on the second layer, which is the big mid-tone, to help me to refine this and give us a more complete picture of how the leaves are positioned, or I should say the trees are positioned, how the sky appears in the distance, how trees run through the forest. This is what I'm starting now. I'm using a mixture of burnt sienna and cobalt blue. The paint consistency here is something like whole milk. It's rather, I won't say thick, but it's rich. And this is an important concept to think about for the watercolorist, because we do count on transparency, but we need dark tones, we need rich tones to create this sort of light that we're trying to create today. So paint consistency is a overriding thought in this, and I'm using it to paint in between the leaves right now. I'm developing a pattern of leaves as I see them kind of swooping towards us and catching the light. So the shapes that I'm creating are basically yellow groups of leaves. You can see how I've created the edges of these groups of leaves. There's little ins and outs, little jagged edges that suggest a group of leaves coming forward. And as I move through the painting, I do keep the same colors and I try to keep the same consistency, but in one section I'll use a little more blue, in another section I'll use a little more burnt sienna to bring variety to this big mid-value. I've noticed in my painting and others that until this mid-value is really complete, in other words, extends from side to side, top to bottom, we're sort of at a loss. We feel a sort of incompleteness or a sort of dissatisfaction with our painting. It's normal, and almost 100% of the time, as soon as we reach to the corners of the paper and there's connections formed in these midtones, as soon as that happens, you start to feel good about your image again. While it's wet, there's an opportunity to add some stronger darks to give us a little depth in the shadows. That's what I'm doing now. I'm refining the shapes of the yellow leaves and adding darks to indicate deeper shadows or trees. Now I'm working into the stone area, the same two colors, maybe favoring a little bit more of that burnt sienna to bring this area forward as it dries. I'm creating the cast shadow. It looks like I'm painting with black. However, as this dries, you'll see it lighten up considerably. The consistency here is something like, the consistency of the paint is something like whole milk or half and half. Let's call it half and half. You know what that's like. So do I. And I'm placing some shadows on that maple tree. Shading the left side, trying to get a feeling of light moving from the right side to the left side. Long shadows help me here, moving in the direction that supports that, as well as shading some of the sides of the larger trees in the composition. And now you can start to feel the connection that I was speaking of earlier, where this midtone, this large midtone, which accounts for about 2/3 of the painting, is now moving from corner to corner, top to bottom, left to right, isolating our lighter shapes and starting to create the feeling of the light that we were seeking from the beginning. As I said, you can see the lower section is drying a bit lighter. We're able to see the underpainting come through, and it's got a bit of glow, which in this sort of situation where you have so much light coming into a forest and bouncing around, light bounce and glowing shadows are everywhere. So to see this come out is good. I'm glad it's happening. I'm using probably the strongest dark right now. This is the same two colors, but they are now the consistency of butter. Very, very thick. And look at how they make those leaves just jump out, how they give an excitement to the edges of the leaves. You feel the branches weaving behind and through the shadows. These are accent touches meant to bring a little more contrast to the scene and isolate maybe some of the forward moving groups of leaves and create a stronger sense of light. That's what this painting is about really, is that autumn light, strong autumn light coming from the right hand side. And I hope you can see in this painting, I've tried to use it to simplify a complex scene. What I'm talking about is this big midtone that moves through the back, across the trees, through the shadows in the fence, and extends in the shadows in the lower left-hand corner. This is the big mid-value, and while it's a complex shape formed of many smaller pieces, it's joined. It's purposely joined so that you feel that it's running through the scene and holding the scene together. More of these strong darks on the smaller maple on the right hand side, kind of framing our scene a little bit. And we're refining some of the leaves now. We've got large groups, and according to our own sense of satisfaction, how much is necessary, how much we really need to do, we can refine these leaves, break them up into smaller groupings. We can also, once the painting is dry, apply a light wash to some of the groups, pushing them effectively back into the picture. And not only are you pushing these things back into the picture, but you're pushing the brighter leaves, the untouched leaves, forward. So you can create more depth with some light washes. You can see that in the middle of the tree I've applied a very pale, warm gray to some of the leaf groupings. And as a result, the leaves that are kind of to the right side are coming towards us even more. The painting is taking on a finished look, and as a Some of the last touches I'm putting in are again with this really strong, rich, almost black color, and I'm creating the texture of the stone in the shadows. At the same time, I'm trying to show that there's leaves on the forest floor that are kind of rising up and resting against the stone fence. So we're creating a little bit of interest in the shadow area here. The pattern of stones is done with dry brush, basically painting the cracks and crevices of the joints of the stones being placed together. And it creates, you see how that the leaf strewn floor, the forest floor, kind of rides up against the fence in the shadow area. I'm happy with that. Painting's coming to a close here, and just adding some nuances of that dark tone. Once we have these in place and it starts to dry, you start to feel a real sense of the light that we are approaching from the beginning, this luminous yellow light that just glows in the whole scene, penetrates even the shadows, the sides of trees, penetrates the background. It's everywhere. And we've captured that through using transparency and through using a fairly dark, strong mid-tone. This is the finished piece after it's dried. You can see the leaves dance towards us in an enjoyable way. The forest floor is glowing with those rich yellows and warm colors. And so it's ended up to be a very satisfying piece.